If you work in Germany, the rules of employment are changing under you right now. And this is simply because of 5 smaller rules that have been set in motion over the past number of months. Some of them are already in force, some are being drafted this month, and some are scheduled for 2030. Individually, they look like separate stories, but together, they tell you exactly where Germany's employment is heading and why. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through all 5 of them. I will explain the 3 forces behind them and give you 3 specific predictions as to where this might lead over the next 2 to 3 years. Hi, I'm Ada. I work in HR here in Germany. This video is a synthesis of what's changing across German employment laws in 2026. We're going to be looking at sick leave rules, pay transparency, task class, skilled workers visas, and working hours. By the end of this video, you would know what's actually changing, what's still just being proposed, why all of it is happening at once, and what to do about it. Let's get into the video. Before I walk you through the 5 changes, I want to name the 3 forces underneath them, because none of these changes are random. All of them are responding to the 3 same pressures. And once you see the pattern, you begin to predict the next round of changes on your own. Let's start with the first one. That's demographic pressure. It's no longer news that Germany can no longer defend demographic pressure that it's upon. The Federal Statistics Office estimates that between 2020 to 2035, probably 10 to 12 million workers will exit German workforce as the baby boomer generation retires. The Bundesagentur für Arbeit projects an ongoing skilled worker gap of over 400,000 per year to maintain workforce parity. These are large numbers. The population aged under 30 in Germany is smaller than the population aged between 30 to 60 by a meaningful margin. A shrinking workforce with growing demands, on it drives more of what you are about to see than any political party. The second force is competitiveness anxiety, and it's particularly against lower cost European peers and Asia. Germany's GDP growth was flat to negative from 2023 to 2025. Manufacturing dominance is being challenged by China's electric vehicles and machinery, and by Poland and the Czech Republic in mid-tier production, and by the United States in tech and AI. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz public statements, including the sick leave reform in July, explicitly uses the phrase competitive disadvantage. And this is a coalition's core narrative for most workplace-facing challenges. And then the third point is EU's integration and digital transformation working simultaneously. Germany doesn't fully own its employment law anymore. The EU Pay Transparency Directive is one recent example. The Platform Workers Directive is also another example. We also have the Whistleblower Directive, the Work-Life Balance Directive, and each one carries a transposition deadline that Germany has to meet, whether it is ready or not. Layered on top of this, we have the digital transformation of employment paperwork, like digital sick notes, the e-signatures on contracts, remote work rules. All of these things come together to reshape how the whole system works. These 3 forces that we mentioned, the demographic pressure, the competitiveness, anxiety, EU integration plus digital transformation, are the water everyone in German workforce right now is swimming in. Every change I'm about to walk you through, it's a downstream from at least one of them, and usually more than one. Now to the changes themselves. The first one, the Merz sick leave reform of 2026, of July 2026. Actually, it was quite recent at the time of recording this video. So on the 2nd of July, the Chancellor Merz announced 2 changes to German sick leave rules as part of his broader economic reform package. The first change is that the 3-day grace period that usually give for sick leave is ending. Under the previous rule, most employees could call in sick for up to 3 consecutive days before being required to submit an Arbeitsunfähigkeitsbescheinigung, that is the medical certificate. But under the new rule, this certificate is required from day 1. That means from your first day of sickness, you have to submit your sick note. And then the second change is telephone-based sick certification, which was introduced during the pandemic and it was made permanent in 2023. That one too is being abolished. Doctors can no longer issue a sick note by phone consultations for minor illnesses. In-person visits become the requirement again. Why is all of this happening? Merz has cited Germany's sick leave rates, which averaged 19.5 to 19.7 days per employees per year in 2024 and 2025. That is the highest in the OECD. And he stated in his framing competitive disadvantage, which is forced too in the framework we just walked through. And what does all of this mean to you? If you get sick, even for one day, you would need to see a doctor in person, and this creates real friction, especially for the doctors. The German Association of General Practitioners have publicly called this an absolute catastrophic. They say it's going to be absolutely catastrophic for its potential to overload the healthcare system. General practitioners' appointments are already hard to get one, especially in most German cities, and you have to expect even longer waits. And then what then is an advice, a practical advice for you? First off, you need to know who your house art is before you need them. You need to have their number saved, and you also need to understand your company's specific reporting protocol, especially for this whole sick leave thing. And if you have a chronic condition that flares occasionally, ask your doctor about a pre-documentation pattern so that it becomes easier for you to raise awareness and get sick leaves as need be. Then the second change, the EU Transparency Directive of June 2026. On the 7th of June, the EU Transparency Directive took effect across all 27 member states. Germany missed the transposition deadline, and a full German implementing law isn't expected until 2027. But this directive is legally binding EU-wide, and German courts are already interpreting existing employment law in light of it. What it gives every employee in Germany. Of course, first off, salary ranges should now be in job ads or disclosed before the first interview. Employers cannot ask you your salary history anymore as they used to in the past. Employees in companies with 100 or more workers can request information on average pay for their role broken down by gender. And employers must make transparent the criteria used to set pay levels. And again, the burden of proof in pay discrimination cases has shifted. The employer must now prove they are not discriminating, rather than you having to prove that they are. You might ask, why is all of this happening? This boils down to force 3 that we mentioned, the EU integration pay transparency. It's an EU-level policy priority. Germany is one of 27 countries obligated to implement it. This is not a change Germany politics get to choose. It's a change Germany politics is now obligated to translate into national law. And what does it mean for you? It means more leverage in every negotiation and more grounds for internal escalation on pay equity. I made a full video specifically on how to use these rights in salary negotiations, so please check that out. Now let's go to the third change, the Steuerklassen reform, which is proposed for 2030. Under the previous coalition, a plan was proposed to phase out Tax Class 3 and Tax Class 5 by January of 2030 and replace them with a factor system inside Tax Class 4. The reform was drafted but not enacted before the previous coalition collapsed. As of mid-2026, the plan remains on the roadmap but has not been formally passed by the current coalition. What does this reform actually propose? Today, married couples in Germany can choose between splitting their tax classes between Tax Class 3 and Tax Class 5. One spouse pays a lower rate and the other pays higher, or splitting Tax Class 4, which is closer to equal. The class 3 and class 5 split typically means the lower earning spouse, statistically most often the women, sees a much smaller monthly take home. The reform would eliminate tax class 3 and tax class 5 entirely, moving everyone to a tax class 4 with factor system. So a same total household tax burden across the year, but distributed more evenly between spouses from month to month. You might ask again, why is this happening? This ties down to two of the forces that we mentioned earlier. The first one is for the demographics, because of course the current system statistically discourages second earners from full-time work, and Germany needs every available hour of labor. For the second force, the competitiveness that we talked about earlier, because a simplified tax system reduces administrative burden. What it means for you in this sense is that if you're a married employee, this is your monthly take home changing without your total annual tax changing. So watch out for it in the future coalition negotiations. If it passes, expect implementation to still land in 2030 as originally planned. Earlier is quite unlikely. So let's look at the fourth change. That's the Chancenkarte and the Skilled Immigration Act updates since 2024. Germany has offered the Chancenkarte, a point-based job seeker visa, allowing qualified non-EU applicants to enter Germany for up to a year to look for work. The Skilled Immigration Act has been updated multiple times through 2024, 2025, and into 2026, with the specific goal of accelerating pathways for skilled workers. What is active right now, you might ask? The Chancenkarte lets you enter Germany for a year based on a point-based system. Points are awarded for language skills, professional experience, qualifications, age, and connection to Germany. During that year, you can work part-time or take short trial jobs while searching for permanent employment. The blue card salary threshold was adjusted downwards for shortage occupations, meaning more roles now qualify for an EU blue card. The qualification recognition is being streamlined for shortage occupations as well. You might also want to know why all of this is happening. It is largely because of the demographics. Germany needs skilled workers to fill the demographic gap and cannot fill it domestically. Every party across the coalition spectrum agrees on this in principle, even where they disagree on the specifics, what it means for every employee in Germany. There are two things. If you are non-EU and considering moving to or extending your stay in Germany, the pathways have never been more open for you. If you're already employed in Germany, however, whether you moved here from Bayern or from Abuja, expect your workplace to become even more international over the next several years. This changes, team compositions, meeting, language, promotion criteria, and how HR itself functions. Now let's talk about the fifth change. This is the most speculative, but also the most consequential. In May 2026, the Bundestag debated a draft reform to the Arbeitszeitgesetz, that's the working hours law. A formal draft bill was expected in June 2026 coming from the Labour Minister, Babel Bass of the SPD, in line with the CDU-CSU/SPD coalition agreement. What does this reform actually propose? Germany's current Arbeitszeitgesetz caps daily working hours at 8, extendable to 10 hours per day under certain conditions. The reform would remove this daily cap and instead enforce a weekly maximum. Employees will still be entitled to at least 11 hours of uninterrupted rest per day and at least 1 full day off per week. Those are EU level requirements. In practice, what this means is that employers could ask employees to work 12 to 13 hours on one day if compensated with shorter days elsewhere in the week. The government is framing it as flexibility, not longer hours in general. The union responses have been sharply critical, warning for exhausting work days. Why is this happening, you might ask again? All these three forces are at once here. Again, the shrinking workforce, it needs to produce more per person. And then secondly, the competitiveness with peer economies have already had weekly cap systems, and the EU Working Time Directive is compatible with either daily or weekly caps. So Germany has flexibility to change without breaching the EU law. What does this mean for you? If the reform passes as drafted, you should look out for your employment contract closely. The current daily protection will be replaced by weekly protection, and how your specific employer structures the transition matters enormously. So you have to check whether your Betriebs Act has been consulted, and if you don't have a Betriebs Act as your company, but your company qualifies for one, this is the time to make a change for that. It's probably worth pursuing for your company to have a Betriebs Act. If you look at the 5 changes together, the 3 forces map cleanly. For example, the 6-league reform is force 2, competitiveness with a touch of force 1, and then, demographics. Then the pay transparency is force 3, for the EU integration. The Steuerklassen reform is force 2 and 3. Demographics plus competitiveness, Chancenkarte and skilled immigration are almost entirely force 1, which leads us back to the demographics. The working hours reform is all 3 at once. And this is why looking at all these changes in isolation misses the entire point. The 3 forces will keep producing more changes as long as the underlying pressure continues. And trust me, they will continue because, for example, demographics are not going to reverse. Competitiveness anxiety is not going to fade away. EU integration is not going to slow down. The specific changes will keep coming, and if you understand the pattern, you'll be able to see each one before it even arrives. So here are my 3 predictions for the next, 2 years. First one, these are analysis, they are forecast and my own opinion, so don't take my word to church. They are not confirmed policies. Take them as informed guesses. The first one, the German workplace is becoming genuinely more transparent. It's also going to become a lot more faster than most people would expect. The pay transparency is one directive. The EU AI Act includes hiring decision transparency requirements coming into force through 2026 and 2027. The whistleblower directive requires internal reporting channels. The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive requires reporting on workforce composition. Now, employers will increasingly need to justify decisions regarding pay, hiring, promotion, and dismissal with documented criteria and data. The consequences: employees who understand this shift can invoke rights that most workers don't yet know they have. My second prediction: the German workplace is becoming more productivity focused, and Friedrich Merz's sick leave reform is the start. So watch out for potential formalization of performance measurement requirements, workplace surveillance databases as AI tools spread. The 4-day work week experiments becoming more statutory options in specific sectors as employers negotiate flexibility trade-offs. So for the third prediction, the German workplace is becoming much more international by structural necessity. And this is regardless of political rhetoric. So demographic wins over ideology on a long enough timeline. So you need to watch out for continued language requirement adjustments for shortage occupations. Further Anakenon reforms, simplifying foreign qualification recognition, family reunification acceleration, and possibly returning in some form, which changes workforce math even further. I also like to flag one more topic that didn't make the 5. And it's regarding the mandatory occupational pension proposal being discussed as part of the rente packet to buy. That deserves its own video because, pension reforms is a complex enough topic to justify a full video on its own. So subscribe if you want that when it drops. What every employee should do this year. There are 4 practical actions for the rest of 2026, regardless of what industry you are in, what nationality you hold, or how long you've been in the German system. The first one, you need to know your house acts before now. Before you get sick, you need to get a day one certificate under the new rules, and this is the most single immediate practical impact. Secondly, you need to check your employment contract for pay transparency compliance, salary bands, criteria for progression, review dates. If you were hired before June 2026 and your contract is silent on any of these points, that's a conversation that you can have during your next review. The third thing would be that you have to engage with your Betriebs Act if your company has one. Every reform in this video has been shaped or contested at the Works Council level. So the Betriebs Act have significantly more power than most employees, especially foreign employees, realize. So if your company doesn't have one but qualifies, this is the year to raise this as a concern. The fourth one would be that you have to stay informed. Subscribe to Bundesministerium für Arbeit and Soziales press release or one of the reliable employment law newsletters. The pace of change is fast enough that any advice I give you today may need updating in 6 months. And now to recap. 5 changes. First, the sick leave rule tightening from July 2026, EU Pay Transparency in force since June 2026, Steuerklassen reform proposed for 2030, Chancenkarte and skilled immigration reform ongoing at the moment since 2024, and working hours reform expected as a draft bill in 2026. The 3 forces behind all of them: demographic pressure, competitiveness anxiety, and EU integration plus digital transformation. My 3 predictions for 2027 and 2028 are transparent workplaces, more productivity focused to workplaces, more international workplaces, and 4 things to do this year. First off, know your house art, check your contracts, engage your Betriebs Act, and stay informed. If this video helps you make sense of the pattern, you might consider subscribing. I'm publishing more videos on these individually as specific laws, get released. Tell me in the comments which of these changes affect you the most or what you're thinking I might have gotten wrong. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.